The abandoned alien child. The alien child was alone. Her small body trembled beneath the shadow of a ruined building. She was weak, hungry, and scared. Her people, once proud and powerful, had vanished without a trace. A cold wind swept through the broken streets, howling like the ghosts of the past. There was nothing left here. Nothing but dust, debris, and silence. Her name was Zira. She was the last of her kind, or so it seemed. The bright green skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light marked her as different from the humans. Her large, luminous eyes darted around, searching for any sign of life. But there was none. Zira had been abandoned. Her parents, her friends, her entire race had disappeared when their home planet was torn apart by war. No one had come to help. No one had looked back. Not even her own kind. The world around her was dying. The once thriving city she called home now lay in ruins, with twisted metal and shattered glass scattered across the cracked ground. The bright blue skies that once glowed with vibrant energy were now dark and stormy, as if the planet itself was mourning its lost inhabitants. Zira's small hands pressed against her chest, her fingers brushing the cold surface of a pendant her mother had given her. It was the only thing she had left of her people, a symbol of love and hope. But now that hope felt distant, like a dream she could no longer remember. She had tried to survive on her own. She had tried to find food, to find shelter, but it was all in vain. There was nothing left on this forsaken world. Her people had once been powerful. Their technology advanced beyond anything the humans could imagine. Yet it all crumbled in the end. No one was left to defend the planet, no one to care for the children who had been left behind. Zira let out a small cry, the sound barely audible over the wind. She was scared. She wanted to believe that someone, anyone, would come for her. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was alone. There would be no rescue. Her home was lost, and with it, any hope she had of a future. Her thoughts were interrupted by a strange sound. It was faint at first, like the hum of distant machinery. Zira's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Was it another one of her people? Had someone come to save her? But as the sound grew louder, Zira's excitement faded. This was not the sound of a familiar craft. It was different, alien even. Her small body tensed as she crouched behind a large piece of debris. She couldn't risk being seen. She had learned it the hard way. For a long time, the humans had been watching her world. They were no strangers to conflict, and they had seen what had happened to her people. They had seen the destruction, the loss, and they had stayed away, waiting, watching. They had always been there in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Zira had heard rumors of humans. She knew they were fierce, dangerous, and relentless. But were they here to conquer her world? Or was this their chance to take what was left, to claim what had once been hers? The hum grew louder, and soon Zira saw it. A ship. A massive metallic vessel with flashing lights and smooth, sleek lines that cut through the sky like a predator on the hunt. The child's heart pounded in her chest. The ship wasn't from her people, she was sure of it. But was it from Earth? Zira had never seen a human before. She had only heard stories. Stories from her parents about a strange, powerful species from another world. But those stories were just whispers now, lost among the ruins of her civilization. Could the humans be here for something more than conquest? Her mind raced. She had no answers, no way of knowing their intentions. But one thing was certain. This ship was her only hope. She had no choice but to take the chance. Maybe the humans would help her. Maybe they would save her from the endless nightmare of loneliness. Taking a deep breath, Zira stood up slowly, her small, fragile body shivering in the cold. She didn't know what would happen next, but she had to try. She had to make herself known. She couldn't stay hidden forever. The ship's engines roared as it touched down with a soft thud, kicking up dust and debris. Zira squinted, her heart racing in her chest. She could see figures moving inside the ship. They were humans. But what would they do now that they had found her? Would they take pity on her? Or would they see her as a threat, something to be eliminated? Zira stepped forward, her eyes locked on the approaching humans. They were close now. She could feel their presence, feel their gazes on her. But would they help her? Or would they leave her behind, just like everyone else? As the humans approached, Zira held her breath. This was the moment that could change everything. Would they be her salvation, or would they abandon her like the rest of her kind? The fate of the last alien child rested in the hands of these strangers. And as the humans drew closer, the suspense hung in the air, thick and heavy, as Zira awaited her destiny. The unexpected arrival of humans. Zira's heart beat loudly in her chest, a quick and nervous rhythm that matched the growing hum of the approaching ship. She watched as the massive vessel slowly descended through the dust and smoke, its metallic surface gleaming despite the chaos around it. The ship's thrusters roared with power, sending waves of hot air that made the ground tremble beneath her feet. The child's eyes widened as she saw the ship's engines shut down, and it touched down on the broken surface of her homeworld with a heavy thud. She had never seen anything like it before. It was sleek, silver, and so unlike the ships her people used. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The hum of the ship's engines faded, and the world around Zira seemed to hold its breath. She stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Fear gripped her small body. The wind howled around her, but she could hardly hear it now. All she could hear was her own thoughts and the soft whisper of hope that grew within her. Was this truly the human she had heard of? Were they really here, or was it just another strange twist of fate? Her mind raced as she remembered the stories her parents once told her about Earth's people, stories of dangerous warriors who had fought across the stars. Could they be coming to finish what her people had started? Or was there a chance, a small chance, that they might be her salvation? The door of the ship opened slowly, revealing a dark interior lit only by the soft glow of control panels. Figures in dark suits stepped out onto the planet's surface, moving quickly and methodically. Zira couldn't make out their faces, but their presence was undeniable. They were humans. The first figure that stepped forward was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that shimmered faintly in the dim light. He moved with purpose, scanning the surroundings, his eyes sharp and alert. Zira held her breath as he looked in her direction. He didn't seem to see her yet, but she could feel his gaze, as though his eyes were searching the ground for any sign of life. Behind him, a woman emerged, smaller and quicker, her movements more fluid. She carried something in her hand, a strange device that seemed to glow with an eerie light. Zira didn't understand what it was, but she could feel its energy, like a pulse that resonated with the planet's dying heart. The woman's face was hidden behind a visor, but her body language was calm, determined. The humans continued to spread out, as if searching for something. Zira stayed hidden behind a pile of rubble, her eyes wide and fearful. She couldn't let them see her. She had to remain silent, unseen. What if they were here to capture her? What if they thought she was a threat, like the others who had come before them? But the humans didn't move with hostility. They didn't seem to be rushing to destroy or capture anything. Their movements were controlled, careful. It was almost as if they were looking for something, but not for a fight. Zira watched as one of them knelt down, scanning the ground where she had been. Her eyes widened as the human scanner passed right over her hiding spot, yet they didn't seem to notice her presence. The child's breathing was shallow as she hesitated. Should she reveal herself? Should she step forward and risk being seen? Or was it better to stay hidden, waiting to see what the humans would do? Suddenly, a voice echoed out across the ruins, breaking the silence. It was a deep, commanding voice. Male, rough with age, but steady. Clear this area. We need to search for survivors. Zira's heart sank. Survivors. Did that mean they had come to save her kind, her people, or was this a search for something else? She couldn't be sure. The woman with the device walked toward the spot where Zira had been hiding. Her eyes scanned the area with precision, moving ever closer to where the child crouched, trying to make herself as small as possible. It was then that Zira saw something she had not expected. The human woman stopped just a few feet away from her hiding place. Zira's pulse quickened, her mind screaming at her to run, to escape before she was discovered. But then, the woman's eyes softened. Zira's breath caught in her throat as the human's gaze locked onto hers. The woman's face, partially covered by a visor, still held a trace of curiosity, something Zira had not seen in anyone's face in a long time. The woman spoke softly, her voice calm and steady. "You're not alone. We've come to help you." Zira blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Was this real? Could it be possible that the humans had come for her, not to destroy her, but to offer help? The woman reached out a hand slowly, as if afraid of scaring her. Zira froze. Should she trust them? Should she take the chance and reach out? Zira hesitated, but something deep inside her made her stand up, slowly stepping out from behind the rubble. Her hands trembled as she extended her own small, fragile fingers toward the human woman's hand. She had no choice. The hope that had long been buried in her heart began to grow again. Perhaps, just perhaps, the humans were here to save her. The first encounter. Zira's small, trembling hand hovered just inches from the human woman's gloved fingers. The silence between them stretched for what seemed like an eternity. The wind whistled around them, and Zira could feel the warmth of the woman's palm reaching through the cold air. Her heart raced, but her instincts told her to trust. With a deep breath, Zira touched the woman's hand. The moment their fingers made contact, something shifted within her. It wasn't the shock she had expected, but instead a comforting warmth, a feeling of safety she hadn't known in what felt like forever. The human woman gave a soft, reassuring smile, and for the first time since the destruction of her home, Zira felt a glimmer of hope. The human woman spoke again, her voice soft but steady. "We're here to help you, little one. You're safe now." Zira didn't know what to say. Her mind swirled with questions, and yet she couldn't find the words to ask. She had been abandoned by her people, left to die on this planet that had once been full of life. Now, standing in front of a human who was offering her help, she could hardly believe it was real. The tall man from the ship approached, his steps heavy on the cracked ground. Zira instinctively took a step back, but the woman's hand gently held hers, keeping her grounded. "Do you think she understands us?" the tall man asked, his voice gruff. The woman nodded. "I think she does. She just needs time." Zira could only stare at them, unsure what to make of the situation. Was it possible that humans, the ones who had fought wars across the stars, were here to help her? She couldn't comprehend it, but the warmth in the woman's eyes made her believe, just for a moment, that there might still be a chance for survival. The tall man took another step forward, his gaze now focused on Zira. He kneeled down, lowering his height to match hers, trying to make himself less intimidating. "Don't worry," he said in a calm, even tone. "We won't hurt you. We've come to take you somewhere safe." Zira blinked, still unsure if she could trust them. She had been alone for so long, isolated in a world that no longer felt like her own. Her home was gone, her people scattered or destroyed. And now these humans had appeared, claiming they wanted to help. But why? Why would they help someone like her? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The fear still gripped her, the uncertainty of the world around her holding her back. Could she truly rely on these humans? Could they be her salvation, or was this just another cruel twist of fate? The woman must have seen the doubt in her eyes. She gently squeezed Zira's hand, guiding her toward the ship. "Come with us. We'll take you somewhere safe, somewhere you can heal. We promise." Zira hesitated, her feet rooted to the ground. The memory of the destruction she had witnessed flashed in her mind, the fires, the screams, the feeling of hopelessness that had consumed her. Her people had abandoned her. No one had cared enough to save her. Why would these humans be any different? But deep inside, a small voice whispered, "Maybe this is your chance. Maybe this is your hope." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Zira nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Okay. With that simple word, she took a tentative step toward the human woman, who gently guided her up the ramp of the ship. Zira looked back one last time at the desolate planet she had once called home. The winds still howled, but something was different now. There was a chance that she could survive, a chance that she could find others like her. And maybe, just maybe, these humans were the key to that future. The door of the ship closed behind them with a soft hiss, sealing them inside. Zira looked out of the small window, watching as the planet grew smaller, the memories of destruction fading behind her. As the ship lifted into the sky, Zira let out a quiet breath, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. The ship was now her safe haven. But as it ascended into the unknown, a question lingered in Zira's mind. What will happen next? Secrets of the ship. Zira sat silently in the small cabin of the human ship, her wide eyes scanning her surroundings. The walls were smooth and metallic, and strange lights flickered softly overhead. She had never seen anything like this before. The ship felt like a living thing, its hum steady and soothing, almost like it was breathing with her. She could hear the soft footsteps of the humans outside her room, the low murmur of their voices as they communicated in a language she couldn't understand. But it wasn't the language that made her uneasy. It was the strange feeling that something was not quite right. This ship, though filled with life and warmth, felt like it was holding a secret, something hidden beneath the surface. Zira hugged her knees to her chest, her mind racing. She had never been on a ship like this before. Her people had used ships, of course, but nothing like this. It was bigger, more advanced, and yet it seemed older. She couldn't explain it, but there was a sense of history woven into the very walls of the vessel. Something about it felt ancient, as if this ship had seen things Zira couldn't even begin to comprehend. Suddenly, the door to her cabin slid open with a soft hiss. Zira quickly looked up, her heart skipping a beat. The human woman, whose face was still partially covered by her visor, stepped inside, her eyes warm and reassuring. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice gentle. Zira didn't respond right away. She wanted to trust the woman, but a part of her still felt wary. She wasn't sure why, but the ship felt alive in a way that made her uneasy. The woman smiled and sat down beside her, giving Zira the space to speak if she wanted to. "You're safe here. You don't have to be afraid." Zira finally spoke, her voice small and uncertain. "This ship, it feels different. Strange." The woman nodded. "I understand. It's not like any ship you've seen before, is it?" Zira shook her head slowly. "No, it feels old. It feels like it's hiding something." The woman's expression softened. She glanced toward the door, as though considering whether to say more. After a moment, she leaned closer to Zira and whispered, "It's not just a ship. It's part of something much bigger, something your people have never seen." Zira's curiosity piqued at the words. "What do you mean?" The woman looked around the cabin again before continuing, her voice lowering. "This ship was built long ago. It was part of a fleet, one that has been lost for centuries. A fleet designed to protect not just your planet, but many others. It's called the Ascendant. And it's not just a ship, it's a weapon that could change everything." Zira's eyes widened. She hadn't heard of anything like this before. Her people had always been the ones with the most advanced technology. They had the ships, the weapons, the knowledge. But this was beyond anything she could have imagined. "Why is it here?" Zira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman paused for a moment, as if considering how much to reveal. Finally, she answered, "Because it's the last hope, the last chance for survival. And we need you, Zira. You're the key to awakening it." Zira felt a chill run down her spine. "I'm the key. How?" The woman smiled gently, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Your people have something that the Ascendant needs, something only you can unlock. It's in your blood, Zira. The answer lies with you. Zira's mind raced, trying to make sense of the woman's words. She had never been told she had any special ability, let alone something that could unlock a powerful ship. Her hands trembled as she stared at the woman, her head spinning with confusion. "Why me?" Zira asked, struggling to understand. The woman reached out and placed a hand on Zira's shoulder, her touch comforting but firm. "Because you're the last of your kind, the only one left who can activate the Ascendant. It's not just a ship, Zira. It's a key to your survival, and to your people's future." Zira's heart beat faster as the weight of the words settled in her mind. She was the last hope. The thought terrified her, but it also ignited something deep inside, something fierce and determined. "I don't know how," Zira said, her voice shaking, "but I will try." The woman nodded, her face full of respect. "I know you will. We're going to help you, Zira. Together, we can awaken the Ascendant and save what's left of your world." As the woman stood to leave, Zira felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. She was scared, confused, but there was a spark of hope, too. For the first time since her world had fallen apart, she felt like there was a chance, maybe not just for her survival, but for the future of her people. The ship, with all its hidden secrets, was waiting, and Zira was ready to face whatever came next. The awakening of the Ascendant. The hum of the ship seemed to grow louder as Zira was led down a narrow hallway by the human woman. The lights above flickered softly, casting strange shadows on the walls. Zira's footsteps echoed as they walked, each one heavier than the last. She was about to enter a part of the ship that no one had seen for centuries, a place that held the key to everything. "Are you sure you want to do this?" the woman asked, her voice quiet but filled with concern. Zira nodded, her face set in determination. "I don't understand it all, but I know I have to try." They stopped in front of a large door, its surface gleaming with ancient symbols. Zira felt a strange pull toward it, like the ship itself was calling to her. The woman touched a panel beside the door, and with a soft hiss, it slid open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, and a giant machine sat in the center. It looked like a cross between a ship's control room and an ancient temple, an odd combination of technology and something much older. Zira felt a shiver run down her spine as she stepped inside. "This is it," the woman said, stepping aside to let Zira approach. "The Ascendant, the ship that could save your world." Zira looked at the machine with awe and fear. She could sense something powerful within it, something alive. The ship wasn't just metal and wires. It was something more. She could feel the weight of its history, the countless years it had waited for someone like her. The woman explained, "To awaken it, you'll need to connect with it. You need to focus and let the ship respond to you. It will listen. Your people have the key, Zira. It's in your blood. You were born to do this." Zira's heart raced. She didn't know how to do it. How could she possibly unlock the power of a ship that had been dormant for so long? But she remembered the warmth of the woman's hand, the safety she had felt when they first met. She was not alone. The humans were with her. And if they believed in her, maybe, just maybe, she could do this. Taking a deep breath, Zira stepped closer to the control panel at the center of the room. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow as she touched the cold metal, and an eerie hum vibrated through the air. The ship responded to her presence, as though it recognized her. The sensation was overwhelming, like an invisible force was wrapping around her, pulling her deeper into the ship's consciousness. The woman stood by, watching with a mix of hope and anticipation. "You're doing it," she whispered. Zira closed her eyes, focusing all of her energy on the ship. Her mind raced with thoughts and emotions, but she pushed them aside, concentrating on the feeling within her. It wasn't just the ship she had to connect with, it was herself. She had to trust that the power inside her was enough. She was the key. She had to believe that. As Zira's fingers brushed the ancient symbols on the panel, the ship's hum grew louder, almost deafening. The floor beneath her feet trembled as the machinery started to stir to life. Lights flashed on, and the walls around her seemed to pulse with energy. The ship was awakening. Suddenly, the machine in front of her lit up, and a deep voice echoed in the room, a voice that seemed to come from both within the ship and from the very air itself. Activation sequence initiated, it announced. Power levels rising. Systems online. Awaiting final confirmation. Zira's heart pounded in her chest. She had done it. She had awakened the Ascendant. But the voice wasn't done. There was more. Warning. Unknown entity detected. Threat level high. Initiating defensive protocols. Zira's eyes snapped open, her body tense. The woman looked at her with wide eyes, panic creeping into her voice. What's happening? The ship's voice continued, calm yet urgent. Hostile forces detected. Defense systems engage. A low rumble filled the room as a section of the wall slid open, revealing a series of weapons mounted on the ceiling, pointing toward the entrance. Zira's breath caught in her throat. The ship had been dormant for so long that it hadn't registered the presence of the humans or the threat that loomed outside. The woman's voice trembled as she spoke. We need to get out of here. It's not just your people's future at stake, Zira. There are enemies coming, and we need to be ready. Zira's mind raced. The Ascendant was ready to fight. But who was it fighting against? And why had it been hidden all these years? As the defensive systems powered up, the ship's voice spoke again. Targeting enemy ships. Preparing for battle. Zira turned to the woman, her voice filled with uncertainty. Who's coming? The woman's face hardened. We don't know, but we'll find out soon enough. We need to move. The Ascendant was awake. And now, Zira had to make a choice. Would she be the leader her people needed? Could she use the power of the Ascendant to defend her world from the unknown enemies who were coming? As the ship's weapons powered up and the first wave of enemy ships neared, Zira knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The battle begins. The hum of the ship's engines filled the air, vibrating through the walls and floors. Zira stood in the center of the control room, her heart racing as she watched the various screens flicker with information. The Ascendant was alive, fully awake, and preparing for a battle that could determine the fate of her people. Beside her, the woman spoke in a steady, urgent voice. Zira, we need to act fast. Enemy ships are closing in. We've got no time to waste. Zira nodded, still trying to process what had just happened. She had never imagined that the ship's awakening would come with such a heavy burden. But now, with the enemy approaching, there was no turning back. The voice of the Ascendant echoed through the room, calm yet filled with authority. Enemy fleet detected. 6 ships closing in at high speed. Weapons systems online. Shielding activated. The walls around them lit up with an eerie blue glow, signaling the ship's defensive shields coming online. The lights overhead dimmed, and a low growl of power vibrated through the ship. Zira could feel it. The raw energy, the force contained within the Ascendant, waiting for her command. The woman turned to Zira, her face pale with worry. Are you ready? Zira didn't answer right away. She wasn't sure if she was ready. No one was. But she had no choice. The future of her people depended on the action she took in the next few minutes. Taking a deep breath, she pressed her hand to the console, feeling the ship respond to her touch. The Ascendant seemed to recognize her, the ship's ancient consciousness merging with hers, guiding her. She spoke quietly, but her words held a command that she didn't expect. Engage the enemy. We fight for humanity. The Ascendant's systems came to life at her command. The ship shuddered beneath her feet as the engines roared, and the massive weapons array inside the ship powered up. The first enemy ship appeared on the radar, a sleek, menacing vessel. It was unlike anything Zira had ever seen. The enemy had technology that was clearly more advanced than what humanity had, but the Ascendant was no ordinary ship. It had been waiting for this moment for centuries. Firing weapons, the ship's voice intoned, almost mechanically. Zira's breath caught in her throat as bright beams of energy shot out from the ship, slicing through the darkness of space. The enemy ship was hit, and it shuddered, its shields flashing brightly before they collapsed under the assault. The enemy vessel began to break apart, debris scattering into the void. Zira's heart pounded. They had won the first round, but the battle wasn't over. The other 5 ships were still closing in, and they wouldn't go down easily. "They're regrouping," the woman said, her eyes scanning the screens. "They've got reinforcements coming in. We've only got minutes before they launch a counterattack." Zira gritted her teeth, focusing all her energy on the Ascendant. The ship responded to her thoughts, shifting its course, ready to meet the next wave of enemies. The Ascendant wasn't just a ship, it was an extension of Zira's will. As long as she held her focus, they could win. The second enemy ship appeared, bigger and more heavily armed than the first. It opened fire first, its weapons crackling with deadly energy as they shot toward the Ascendant. Zira felt a brief surge of panic, but then the Ascendant's shields flared to life, absorbing the blasts. The ship's defensive systems were holding strong, but the enemy's firepower was intense. "Return fire," Zira commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. She wasn't sure if her voice alone could control the ship, but she knew one thing for certain: she had to keep fighting. Energy beams shot from the Ascendant's cannons, slamming into the enemy ship with pinpoint accuracy. The enemy tried to evade, but the Ascendant's targeting systems were unmatched. The second ship was hit, its hull buckling under the fire. Within moments, it was nothing but debris floating in space. Zira let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. 2 down, but 4 more to go. The battle was far from over. Suddenly, the ship shook violently, and alarms blared throughout the control room. Zira's eyes widened as she saw a new threat on the radar. A massive enemy ship, far larger than anything she had faced so far, was bearing down on them. "They'd brought in the heavy artillery," the woman said, fear creeping into her voice. "That ship could destroy us if we don't do something." Zira clenched her fists. She wasn't going to let that happen. She had to fight. The future of her people was in her hands. She reached for the controls, focusing her mind on the Ascendant, calling on all its power. "Prepare to engage," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. The ship responded, its engines powering up as it turned toward the massive enemy vessel. Zira felt her heart racing as the Ascendant powered up its weapon systems to full capacity. This was it, the moment that could change everything. As the massive enemy ship drew closer, Zira knew there was no turning back. She was humanity's last hope. She had to win. "Firing," the Ascendant's voice said, and the battle continued. The final stand. The enemy's massive ship loomed ahead, its dark hull blocking out the stars behind it. Zira's hands gripped the control console with fierce determination. The Ascendant was ready, but this next part of the battle would test everything they had left. The control room was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of the Ascendant's systems preparing for what was coming. Zira could feel the ship's ancient power thrumming beneath her feet, responding to her every thought, every command. But even with all its power, the Ascendant was facing a threat unlike any they had encountered before. The massive enemy ship opened fire, its energy beams lighting up space with deadly flashes. Zira didn't hesitate. "Activate full shields," she commanded. Instantly, the Ascendant's protective barrier flared to life, absorbing the blasts. The ship rocked from the impact, but it held steady, its shield holding firm against the onslaught. The woman, standing beside Zira, eyed the radar screen nervously. "They're closing in fast. We can't keep this up for much longer." Zira's mind raced. She knew that every second counted. If they couldn't take down this massive ship soon, the Ascendant would be overwhelmed. She had to act, and she had to act now. "Prepare weapons," Zira said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. Her eyes locked on the giant enemy ship, narrowing in focus. "We're going to end this now." The Ascendant's weapons powered up, massive cannons glowing with dangerous energy. Zira's hand hovered over the firing controls, feeling a surge of power flow through her. The Ascendant was ready. She was ready. All that was left was to strike. Firing, Zira said, almost to herself. The command sent a wave of energy pulsing from the Ascendant's cannons, a brilliant beam of light cutting through the darkness of space. The first shot struck the enemy ship's outer hull, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The enemy ship shuddered, but it didn't go down. The sheer size and strength of the ship were overwhelming. It was a behemoth, and one shot wasn't enough to bring it down. "We need to hit it harder," the woman said, her voice shaking with tension. "We can't survive another round of attacks like that." Zira knew the stakes were high. If they failed now, humanity would lose everything. The Ascendant was their last hope. She focused all her energy, using every ounce of concentration to guide the ship's weapons with precision. Another blast of energy tore through the enemy ship, this time targeting its engines. Sparks flew, and the ship's thrusters sputtered, but it remained in the fight. Zira gritted her teeth, unwilling to back down. There was no retreat now, no surrender. She had to win this for humanity. "Fire again," Zira shouted, her heart pounding in her chest. The Ascendant responded, its energy beams flashing one after another. Each shot found its mark, tearing through the enemy ship's shields and hull. But still, it wasn't enough to bring the massive vessel down. Zira's hands moved quickly, the ship's controls becoming an extension of her own body. With one final surge of power, she focused everything on the most vulnerable part of the enemy ship, the core, deep within its heart. "Targeting core," the Ascendant's voice announced. Zira exhaled slowly. This was it. The enemy ship had already taken significant damage. The next shot would determine everything. She couldn't afford any mistakes. The Ascendant fired again, its weapons unleashing a devastating blast that tore through space and slammed into the core of the enemy ship. For a moment, everything was silent. And then, the enemy ship erupted in a brilliant explosion, a wave of energy radiating outward. The blast sent shockwaves through space, but the Ascendant remained steady, its shields holding strong. The giant ship was destroyed. Zira stared at the screen, her breath coming in quick bursts. It was over. The last enemy ship was gone, reduced to nothing but debris drifting through space. But the victory felt hollow. Zira looked at the woman beside her, who was also staring at the screen in disbelief. "We did it," the woman whispered, as if in shock. Zira's mind was racing. She had won the battle. But at what cost? There had been so much destruction, so many lives lost. She was proud, yes, but she couldn't ignore the heavy weight of what had just transpired. But in that moment, she also knew one thing. Humanity had survived. The Ascendant had proven that humanity could stand against the odds, could fight back even when the situation seemed impossible. The future was uncertain, but for now, humanity had a chance. They had survived the invasion, and the Ascendant had led them to victory. Zira turned her gaze to the stars outside the window. There was still much to be done, but for now, they could rest. Humanity had won.